Have you ever wondered if your arguments are as sound as they seem? It's a question we often overlook, but it's a crucial one. Welcome to the enigma of logical fallacies. These are the errors in reasoning that undermine our arguments, often without us even realizing it. Picture this. You're in a heated debate, your heart is pounding, your words are flowing, and you're convinced that your argument is solid. But what if it's not? What if, hidden among your passionate words, there lies a logical fallacy? This isn't about being right or wrong, it's about how we reason and the pitfalls we can fall into without even noticing. Logical fallacies are like unseen traps in our path of reasoning. They're the slip-ups that can make our arguments crumble, the missteps that can steer us away from the truth. They're subtle, they're sneaky, and they're more common than you might think. But why should we care about logical fallacies? Why does it matter if our arguments have a few flaws? Here's the thing. Critical thinking is a vital tool in our daily lives. It helps us make decisions, solve problems, and understand the world around us. And logical fallacies, they're the enemies of critical thinking. They distort our reasoning, they cloud our judgment, and they can lead us down the wrong path. So let's shine a light on these hidden traps. Let's unravel the enigma of logical fallacies. From the ad hominem fallacy to the appeal to authority, from the strawman to the false dilemma, from the slippery slope to the circular argument, and finally, the hasty generalization. Each one is a pitfall waiting to trip us up, a distortion of logic that can derail our reasoning. So are you ready to explore these unseen pitfalls? Are you ready to challenge your reasoning and sharpen your critical thinking skills? Then buckle up. It's about to get interesting. Let's dive into the world of logical fallacies and see how they can mislead us. Ever been in a debate where the opponent attacks you, not your argument? Welcome to the world of the ad hominem fallacy, a tactic that's as old as argument itself. The ad hominem fallacy, Latin for against the man, is a strategy where someone attempts to undermine an argument not by discrediting the argument itself, but by attacking the person making the argument. It's a bit like saying, I don't need to refute your argument because you're not trustworthy, or you're biased, or you're simply not likable. Imagine this. You're in a debate about climate change and you present a well-researched point about rising sea levels. Instead of countering your point with facts, your opponent says, well, you drive a gas-guzzling car, so your argument is invalid. That's ad hominem. They're attacking you, not your argument. This fallacy is particularly prevalent in social and political debates. Politicians often resort to personal attacks rather than addressing the issues at hand. It's easier to tarnish a person's reputation than to dismantle a well-constructed argument. But here's the thing. An ad hominem attack doesn't actually disprove the argument. It's a distraction, a smokescreen. It's a way for the attacker to avoid confronting the actual issue. So, the next time you're in a debate, watch out for the ad hominem fallacy. Don't let personal attacks distract you from the real issues. Stick to the facts and remember, an attack on character is not an attack on argument. Just because an authority says it doesn't make it true. This question introduces us to the appeal to authority fallacy. This logical flaw occurs when someone argues that a claim must be true simply because an expert or authority on the issue has said it is. But remember, even experts can be wrong sometimes. Let's take an example. Suppose a famous athlete endorses a particular brand of energy drink, claiming it's the secret to their success. That's the appeal to authority fallacy right there. The athlete, while an authority in their sport, is not necessarily an expert in nutrition or health. Yet, their endorsement might persuade many to believe the energy drink is beneficial, which may not be the case. Another common arena for the appeal to authority fallacy is political discourse. Politicians often quote experts or cite studies to support their arguments. While it's not inherently wrong to refer to expert opinions, it becomes a fallacy when the authority is not truly an expert in the field, or when the consensus among experts is ignored in favor of a single dissenting opinion. So, how do we avoid falling into the appeal to authority trap? The key is to evaluate the credibility of the source and the consensus among other experts in the field. And remember, just because an idea is popular or comes from someone with a title doesn't necessarily make it true. Authority does not always equate to truth. So, the next time you see an advertisement or hear a politician quote an expert, take a moment to think critically about the information being presented. Have you ever seen someone twist another's argument to make it easier to attack? This is the core of the Strawman Fallacy, a deceptive technique that can easily mislead those who aren't aware of it. Imagine this. Two people are in a heated debate. One person puts forth a complex argument, The other person, instead of addressing the actual points made, distorts or simplifies the argument, turning it into a straw man. This straw man is much easier to defeat than the original argument, but toppling it is an empty victory. It's like claiming you've won a boxing match because you knocked down a man made of straw. Let's consider an example. Say you're arguing that we should care more about the environment. A Strawman fallacy might look like this. So you're saying we should all live like cavemen with no technology or modern conveniences? Of course, that's not what you're arguing at all, but this distortion makes your argument seem ridiculous and easily dismissed. The Strawman fallacy is a common tactic in debates and discussions, particularly in the political arena. It's a way to appear to refute an opponent's argument without actually engaging with the substance of their points. But it's important to remember that it's a fallacy, a trick, not a valid argument. So keep your eyes open for the Strawman fallacy. Recognize it, call it out, and stick to the real issues at hand. Because after all, misrepresenting an argument does not make your argument stronger. Are we always stuck between two extremes? Let's delve into the false dilemma fallacy, also known as the either-or fallacy, which would have us believe so. This fallacy occurs when an argument presents only two options or solutions, when in reality there are many more. Imagine a friend telling you, "If you're not with me, you're against me." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This is a classic example of a false dilemma, where the complexity of human relationships is reduced to two opposing sides with no middle ground. Or consider a political debate where someone argues, either we cut funding for public services or our economy will collapse. This is another example of a false dilemma. It completely ignores the possibility of a balanced budget or alternative economic strategies. So, why is this fallacy problematic? It's because it limits our thinking and decision-making. By reducing the world to black and white, we miss out on the shades of gray, the nuances, complexities, and alternatives that could provide better solutions or deeper understanding. This fallacy can sway public opinion, justify extreme actions, and even manipulate our personal choices. It's essential to recognize it and challenge it when we encounter it in debates, discussions, or even in our own thought processes. Remember, life doesn't usually deal in absolutes. Life rarely offers only black and white. There's a whole spectrum of grays. So let's not fall into the trap of the false dilemma fallacy. Let's embrace the grays. Does one small misstep always lead to a catastrophic chain of events? Well, not necessarily. Yet this is the exact premise of the slippery slope fallacy. This fallacy asserts that a relatively small first step leads inevitably to a chain of related events culminating in some significant impact, much like a snowball rolling down a hill, gaining speed and size. Let's illustrate with an example. Suppose someone argues that if we allow children to decide their bedtime, they will eventually want to make all their decisions, leading to chaos and anarchy. The argument is a slippery slope because it assumes without evidence that letting children choose their bedtime will inevitably result in extreme outcomes. It's important to note that not all arguments that forecast a series of events are fallacious. Some indeed have a logical and likely progression. The slippery slope becomes a fallacy when it's based on fear and speculation rather than evidence. Slippery slope arguments can be persuasive because they appeal to our emotions, particularly fear. They can lead to fear-based decisions, where we avoid a course of action not because it's inherently wrong, but because we're afraid of where it could lead. In critical thinking, it's essential to separate fear from fact. Remember, just because one event can lead to another, it doesn't mean it necessarily will. Ultimately, it's a matter of probability, not certainty. One thing does not necessarily lead to another. Ever felt trapped in an argument that just goes round and round? This is the essence of the circular argument fallacy, or begging the question. This fallacy is like a dog chasing its tail, spinning in a loop without making any real progress. Imagine two people arguing about the existence of extraterrestrial life. One person says, aliens exist because there's evidence in ancient scriptures. When asked about the validity of those scriptures, he replies, the scriptures are valid because they were written by aliens. See the problem? The argument is supporting itself. It's circular and doesn't bring any new evidence to the table. Or consider another example, where a person asserts that their favorite sports team is the best because, well, they always win. But when asked why they always win, the response is simply, because they're the best team. Again, the argument is going in circles, offering no real evidence or reasoning. The danger of the circular argument fallacy is that it can lead to unproductive debates. It creates a false sense of validation, where people believe they've made a strong argument when, in reality, they've just been running in circles. It's like being stuck in a maze with no exit in sight. So the next time you find yourself in an argument, be alert. Don't let yourself get caught in this circular trap. Remember, an argument that supports itself isn't really an argument. Do we often judge too quickly based on limited evidence? In the world of logical fallacies, this question brings us to the hasty generalization fallacy. So, what is it? Simply put, it's making a broad generalization or drawing a conclusion based on a small or insufficient sample size. Think of it like this. You try a new restaurant, have a bad experience, and then conclude that all the food at that restaurant must be terrible. Or, you meet a rude person from a certain country, and then decide that everyone from that country must be rude. It's like saying, all dogs are bad because one bit me. These are all examples of a hasty generalization fallacy. It's easy to see how this kind of thinking can lead to harmful stereotypes and biases. When we make snap judgments based on limited experiences or data, we risk painting entire groups with the same brush. This can lead to misperceptions and misunderstandings, and can even fuel prejudice and discrimination. So how can we avoid this fallacy? It's all about being aware and critical of our own thinking. We need to remember that a few instances do not represent the whole. We need to be open to more information, more experiences, and more perspectives. Remember, a hasty generalization fallacy can lead us down a path of flawed reasoning and unfair judgments. A few does not represent all. So next time you find yourself making a snap judgment, pause for a moment and think, am I committing a hasty generalization fallacy? So, how do we avoid these pitfalls in our thinking? A fantastic question to wrap up our exploration of logical fallacies. Let's take a quick journey back through the labyrinth of logic we've navigated together. We started with the ad hominem fallacy, remember? The pitfall of attacking the person rather than their argument. It's a tempting trap, but one we must sidestep if we're to engage in fruitful discourse. Then we delved into the appeal to authority fallacy, the perilous assumption that an argument is valid simply because a perceived authority figure endorses it. Not all that glitters is gold, and not all that is pronounced by the so-called experts is necessarily true. We then tackled the Strawman Fallacy, where one misrepresents an opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. This tactic might win you a round of applause, but it won't win you the truth. Next up was the false dilemma fallacy, the illusion of limited options. Life is rarely black and white, and our reasoning shouldn't be either. We then climbed the slippery slope fallacy, the assumption that one event will inevitably lead to another without any proof. It's a steep slope that can lead us to erroneous conclusions. The circular argument fallacy was next on our journey, the pitfall of using your conclusion as your premise. In other words, going around in circles without making any real progress. And finally, we navigated the hasty generalization fallacy, the danger of making broad conclusions based on limited evidence. It's a shortcut that can lead us astray. The journey through logical fallacies is a journey of self-awareness. Today we only covered a small number of fallacies, as there are many more. Critical thinking is about recognizing the pitfalls in our thinking, challenging our assumptions, and striving for more robust, well-reasoned arguments. Logical fallacies are not just errors in reasoning, they are missed opportunities for understanding, for growth, and for connection. So let's challenge ourselves to avoid these pitfalls, to think critically, to question, and to learn. Question everything, especially your own beliefs and arguments.